Hello everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
One basket. One lonely night. Learn small talk at Laundromat. Practice slow English reading. English story for listening practice. Have you ever felt so lonely that you started talking to the washing machine just to hear a voice? That sounds like a joke, but one winter night in America, I almost did exactly that. I had moved to the United States only 3 weeks earlier. I had a small apartment, 2 suitcases, a part-time job, and a phone full of unanswered messages. Every day I heard English around me, but it moved too fast. People smiled, said something, and kept walking.
I nodded, pretending I understood.
Inside, I felt invisible. If you are learning English and thinking about giving up, I want you to stay for this story. Because the kind with bright fluorescent lights, humming machines, and the smell of detergent that never leaves your clothes. That evening I carried a heavy basket down icy steps and walked 3 blocks through cold wind. The laundromat was nearly empty. One machine rattled in the corner. A television played a sports game with the sound turned off. I loaded my clothes, pressed a few buttons, and sat down with my English notebook. On the first page I had written simple phrases. Hi, how are you? Cold today, isn't it? I'm still learning English. They looked easy on paper. In real life they felt terrifying. My heart beat faster every time someone opened the door. Then a man about my age walked in carrying a blue laundry bag. He wore a baseball cap and looked tired, like someone coming home after a long shift.
He nodded at me.
I nodded back. 10 seconds passed. 20 seconds. My brain screamed. Say something. My mouth refused to cooperate. This is the strange thing about loneliness. It does not only make you sad. It makes you silent. Researchers have found that social isolation increases anxiety and makes everyday interactions feel more threatening. Your brain starts treating a simple conversation like a dangerous situation. No wonder my hands felt cold, even inside a heated laundromat. I looked down at my notebook and saw the sentence, cold today, isn't it? Before I could overthink it, I said it out loud. The man smiled. Yeah, freezing. You new around here? That was it. 7 words. A tiny question. But to me it felt like someone had opened a locked door. Yes, I said slowly. I moved here from another country. My English is not very good. It's good enough, he said. I'm Mike. For the next 5 minutes we talked about weather, rent prices, and how laundromats somehow make every city smell the same. The conversation was simple.
No fancy vocabulary.
No perfect grammar. But when he laughed at one of my awkward comments, something surprising happened. I laughed too. Not because the joke was amazing. Because for the first time in weeks, I felt included. That night I learned a lesson most language textbooks never teach. Small talk is not about information. It is about connection. Americans often start conversations with weather, sports, traffic, or laundry not because those topics are important, but because they are safe bridges between strangers. Once the bridge exists, real conversation becomes possible. While the dryer spun, Mike told me he had moved to the city years earlier and spent months feeling alone. Everybody thinks adults already know how to make friends, he said. They don't. That sentence stayed with me. Adults know how to work, pay bills, and answer emails. Making friends is a different skill. And for immigrants, language learners, and people starting over, it can feel like climbing a mountain in wet shoes. My dryer stopped. I stood up to fold my clothes, and naturally, I became clumsy. A pile of socks fell onto the floor. Mike helped me pick them up. We both laughed. The laundromat suddenly felt less like a waiting room and more like a place where humans accidentally help each other. Funny enough, psychologists call this the mere exposure effect. The more often we see the same people in ordinary places, the more comfortable we become with them. Coffee shops, gyms, Parks and yes, laundromats quietly create opportunities for connection. Before leaving, Mike pointed at my notebook.
Keep using that, he said.
But don't wait until your English is perfect.
Talk now.
I walked home carrying warm clothes against my chest. The streets were still cold, the rent was still expensive, and my English was definitely not perfect. Yet something had changed. I realized that loneliness had not disappeared because of a deep conversation. It had disappeared because I dared to say one simple sentence. The next Saturday, I returned to the laundromat. Not because I had more laundry than usual, because I was curious. Would Mike be there? Could I start another conversation? Could this become a tiny weekly ritual in a country that still felt strange? That question pulled me through the door. And here is where the story becomes interesting. Over the following months, those short laundromat conversations slowly changed my English, my confidence, and eventually my entire life. They led to friendships, unexpected opportunities, and a love story I never saw coming. But on that first night, I knew none of that. I only knew that a basket of dirty clothes had brought me into the same room as another lonely person. People often imagine life-changing moments as dramatic events, a big speech, a perfect opportunity, a lucky break. Mine began with a washing machine making too much noise. If you are watching this video to practice English listening, remember this. You do not need advanced grammar to begin connecting with people. You need a few simple phrases, a little courage, and the willingness to sound imperfect for 30 seconds. That is often enough to start a conversation. And sometimes, a conversation is enough to start a new life. As I unlocked my apartment door that night, I looked at my notebook again. The page with "cold today, isn't it?" no longer looked silly. It looked powerful. I added a new sentence underneath it. Maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. Then I closed the notebook, folded my clean clothes, and waited for next Saturday, without realizing that the laundromat was about to become the most important classroom I had ever entered.
Listening tip.
Read these short lines aloud slowly. Cold today, isn't it? I moved here from another country. My English is not very good. Maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. Repeat them 3 times and notice how natural they begin to feel. The stranger beside the dryer. What if the most important person in your future walked into your life carrying a bag of dirty laundry? Not wearing expensive clothes. Not arriving in a dramatic movie scene. Not standing under perfect lighting with romantic music playing in the background. Just a stranger pushing open a laundromat door while you were trying to decide whether your English was good enough to survive another weekend. America. If you are practicing English listening today, pay close attention to this chapter because everything changed from a conversation that almost never happened. The strange thing about life is that huge transformations often disguise themselves as ordinary moments. At the time, I thought I was only washing clothes. Looking back, I was standing at the beginning of an entirely different life. The following Saturday arrived colder than the previous one. Snow rested on parked cars like powdered sugar. The sky looked gray and tired.
Part of me wanted to stay home.
That is what loneliness does. It convinces you that isolation is safer than disappointment. My brain immediately started creating excuses. Maybe Mike would not be there. Maybe he had only been polite. Maybe I would sit alone again staring at spinning machines and pretending to study English vocabulary. But curiosity is a powerful force. Sometimes curiosity succeeds where confidence fails. So I picked up my laundry basket and walked back to the laundromat. The bell above the door rang as I entered. I looked around. No Mike. Immediately my excitement dropped. I loaded my clothes into a washer and sat near the window. 10 minutes passed. 15 minutes passed. Then the door opened. A woman stepped inside carrying a large basket overflowing with colorful clothes. She looked about my age. Brown hair, warm smile, comfortable winter jacket. Nothing dramatic. Yet for some reason she seemed different from everyone else who entered that place. I quickly looked away, then looked back, then pretended not to look again. Human beings have been performing this awkward dance for thousands of years. She loaded a washing machine 2 rows away from mine. While waiting, she sat down and pulled out a book. Now, here is something language learners rarely talk about. When your English is limited, you do not only fear making mistakes. You fear becoming forgettable. You worry that people will see your accent before they see your personality. You worry that conversations will end before they begin. You worry that you will always remain outside the circle. Researchers studying social anxiety often describe something called the spotlight effect. We believe everyone notices our mistakes far more than they actually do. In reality, most people are too busy worrying about their own lives to judge ours. Unfortunately, I had not learned that lesson yet. So I sat quietly. The washing machines hummed. The dryers rattled. The television flashed silent advertisements. Then something unexpected happened. A sock escaped from my laundry basket. Not a dramatic event. Not exactly breaking news. But the sock rolled across the floor like it had a mission from the universe. Straight toward the woman. She picked it up, held it in the air, and smiled. "Is this yours?" 3 words. 1 sock. A life-changing moment. "Yes," I said. Then I froze. My brain stopped working. She waited. I waited. The sock waited. Finally, I laughed. Most adventurous sock I have. The grammar was questionable. The sentence sounded strange. But she laughed. A real laugh. Not a polite laugh. And suddenly the conversation was alive. "You should keep an eye on it," she said. "I think it wants freedom." That was the first joke we ever shared. Her name was Emily. For the next 20 minutes we talked about surprisingly ordinary things. Laundry, weather, apartments, the city, favorite foods. She spoke naturally but slowly when she realized English was not my first language. Something remarkable happened during that conversation. I understood maybe 80% of what she said. Not 100%. Not even close. Yet for the first time since arriving in America, I realized I did not need perfect understanding to enjoy a conversation. Many language learners secretly believe communication requires perfection. It does not. Communication requires courage. Your brain can fill small gaps. Your heart can understand more than your vocabulary sometimes allows. Emily asked why I moved to the United States. I explained my job situation, my dream of building a better future, my struggle with English, my loneliness. I expected embarrassment. Instead, she nodded. "I think everybody feels lonely sometimes," she said. That sentence hit me harder than she could have imagined. Because loneliness loves to tell lies. It tells you that you are the only one struggling, the only one feeling lost, the only one sitting in a crowded city feeling invisible. But loneliness is surprisingly democratic. It visits students, immigrants, parents, retirees, successful professionals, even people surrounded by friends. For a few moments, the laundromat felt less like a room full of machines and more like a place where strangers quietly admitted they were human. As our clothes continued spinning, we exchanged stories about cultural differences in America. I told her how surprised I was when strangers smiled at me in stores. She laughed, then explained that many Americans use casual friendliness as social lubrication, not because they want deep friendship immediately, because small interactions help society feel smoother. That idea fascinated me. Back home, conversations often began after relationships formed. In America, relationships often began because conversations formed. The order was reversed. And suddenly small talk made sense. It was not meaningless. It was infrastructure, like roads connecting cities. Without roads, nothing travels. Without small talk, friendships rarely move. The more Emily explained American social habits, the more comfortable I felt. She even taught me a few simple phrases people used naturally. How's it going? Pretty good. Can't complain. Have a good one. Simple expressions. Tiny building blocks. But they sounded like secret keys to a world I wanted to enter. Before leaving, she closed her book and stood beside her dryer. You come here every Saturday? She asked. My heart immediately became aware of its existence. Usually, I answered. Me too. That was all. No dramatic music.
No fireworks.
No movie ending. Yet something about those 3 words stayed with me all week. Me too. The phrase echoed in my head during work, during dinner, while studying English. For someone who had spent weeks feeling disconnected from everyone around him, those words felt surprisingly powerful. Because they suggested continuity, a future conversation, a familiar face, a reason to return. That night, I walked home carrying warm clothes again. But this time I carried something else. Anticipation. Scientists often explain that anticipation can increase happiness nearly as much as the event itself. Having something positive to expect changes the chemistry of your thoughts. Suddenly the future feels less threatening. For the first time since arriving in America, next Saturday mattered. And what I did not know was this. The laundromat was slowly becoming my classroom. Mike had taught me that small talk could open doors. Emily was about to teach me what waited on the other side of those doors. The strange part? Neither of us had any idea where those conversations would lead. At that moment, we were simply 2 people waiting for clean clothes. But sometimes life hides its biggest surprises inside the most ordinary routines. And next Saturday, another conversation would begin. One that would make me question everything I thought I knew about friendship, belonging, and perhaps even love. Clumsy greetings, unexpected feelings. Have you ever practiced a conversation in your head 100 times, only to forget every word when the moment finally arrived? If that has happened to you while learning English, you are not alone. In fact, that exact thing happened to me the week after meeting Emily at the laundromat. What surprised me was not that I forgot words. What surprised me was why I cared so much. Just a few weeks earlier, I had been counting days in America like a lonely traveler waiting for time to pass. Now I was counting days until Saturday. And that realization scared me a little. Because whenever something starts to matter, the possibility of failure suddenly feels real. If you are here to practice slow English listening and reading, stay with me. Because this chapter begins with a simple greeting and ends with a question that kept me awake half the night. The entire week I practiced English everywhere. While washing dishes, I repeated phrases. While walking to work, I repeated phrases. While waiting for coffee, I repeated phrases. How's your week going? Any plans for the weekend? That's interesting. Really? Tell me more. These were not advanced expressions. They were ordinary. Yet ordinary English often creates extraordinary opportunities. Language experts frequently explain that conversation depends less on difficult vocabulary and more on automatic responses. Native speakers are not constantly inventing sentences. They are using familiar patterns again and again. Once I understood that idea, English felt less like a giant mountain and more like a collection of small stepping stones. Saturday finally arrived. I reached the laundromat 10 minutes earlier than usual, not because I was excited. At least that is what I told myself. The door opened. I looked up. Not Emily.
An elderly man.
The door opened again. Not Emily, a woman carrying 3 laundry baskets. Another 10 minutes passed. Then the bell above the door rang once more. Emily walked in. Suddenly, every English phrase I had practiced disappeared from existence. My brain became an empty apartment. She smiled. Hey. One word. Simple. Friendly. Effective. Meanwhile, my carefully prepared conversation collapsed immediately. Hello, yes, hi, good. Saturday. Saturday? That was my response. Not a sentence. Not a greeting. Just the name of a day. If embarrassment burned calories, I would have lost 5 pounds. Fortunately, Emily laughed. And that laugh saved me. One reason humor matters so much in communication is that it lowers pressure. Psychologists have found that shared laughter increases feelings of trust and social connection. In other words, a small awkward moment can actually strengthen a conversation when both people find it funny. Good Saturday? She asked playfully. Yes, I said. Very Saturday. Now we were both laughing. Strangely enough, that ridiculous exchange made everything easier. Perfection had left the room. Real conversation could begin. While loading our clothes into separate machines, we talked about work. She worked at a local community center helping families and children. I told her about my part-time job and the challenges of adapting to life in America. What's been the hardest part? She asked. I thought for a moment. The silence. She looked curious. The silence.
Yes.
Back home, I always knew people. Family.
Friends.
Neighbors. Here I hear people everywhere, but I don't know anyone. Emily nodded slowly. That makes sense. There was no dramatic speech. No magical solution. Just understanding. Sometimes understanding feels more valuable than advice. The conversation continued naturally. For the first time, I noticed something interesting about American culture. People often ask personal questions much sooner than I expected. Not intrusive questions. Human questions. Questions about experiences, goals, feelings, and plans. At first, I found this surprising. In many places, trust comes before openness. Here, openness often helps create trust. Emily asked what I wanted most from my future. Nobody in America had asked me that before. I looked at the spinning washing machine, then answered honestly. I want to feel like I belong. The words came out quietly, yet once spoken, they felt important. Belonging is a strange thing. Most people only notice it when it is missing, like oxygen or internet access. You rarely celebrate having it. You immediately notice losing it. Emily smiled gently. I think you're getting closer. I wanted to ask how she knew. Instead, I changed the subject because vulnerability still felt uncomfortable. So we started talking about language learning. I explained how frustrating English could be. One day I understood everything. The next day I understood almost nothing. Some accents sounded clear. Others sounded like someone had hidden all the vowels. She laughed again, then told me something I never forgot. You know what's funny? What? Most native speakers feel awkward during conversations too.
Ist sehr daher. No.
Yes. That can't be true. It is. According to Emily, many people worried about saying the wrong thing, sounding boring, creating awkward silence, or making poor first impressions. That idea shocked me. I had spent weeks assuming native English speakers moved through conversations with complete confidence. Apparently many were improvising too. That realization changed everything. Language was not a performance. It was participation. You did not need perfection to join. You only needed willingness. As the dryers continued spinning, more people entered the laundromat. A father with 2 children. A college student carrying headphones. A retired couple folding towels. For the first time, I noticed how many conversations started with tiny comments. Busy today. Cold outside. Nice jacket. Long week. Small talk was everywhere, like invisible threads connecting strangers. Before arriving in America, I had dismissed these interactions as meaningless. Now I saw their purpose. Small talk was not the conversation. It was the invitation, the doorway,
The bridge.
Without it, most deeper relationships would never begin. Then something happened that caught me completely off guard. Emily pointed toward my notebook. You still bring that every week? I smiled.
Yes.
Can I see? My heart immediately accelerated. The notebook contained practice sentences, vocabulary mistakes, crossed-out phrases, and dozens of awkward attempts at sounding natural. It felt strangely personal, yet I handed it over. She flipped through several pages, then stopped. A smile appeared.
What?
She pointed to one sentence. Written in careful handwriting were the words, "Maybe I'm not as alone as I thought." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of the dryer seemed louder. The room felt smaller. Then she looked up. You wrote this after we met? Technically after meeting Mike, but also after meeting her. I nodded. She smiled again. Not the polite smile from our first conversation. A different smile. Warmer. More personal. The kind of smile that makes you wonder what another person is thinking. Then she handed back the notebook.
I'm glad.
Just 2 words.
I'm glad.
Yet those words followed me home that evening. All night. Because they raised a question I had been trying to avoid. Was I simply becoming more comfortable in America? Or was I beginning to look forward to seeing one specific person? At that point, I honestly did not know. But I knew this. The laundromat no longer felt like a place where clothes became clean. It felt like a place where something inside me was slowly waking up. And the following Saturday would bring a conversation neither of us expected. A conversation that would turn curiosity into friendship and friendship into something much harder to ignore. Winter, silence, and the empty apartment. Have you ever achieved the thing you dreamed about for years, and then felt strangely miserable after getting it? Nobody talks about that part. People celebrate the arrival, the new country, the new opportunity, the exciting beginning. They post smiling photos. They share inspiring stories. They make it sound like stepping onto American soil instantly transforms life into a movie. What they rarely show is the moment you sit alone in a small apartment on a freezing winter night, staring at a microwave dinner, wondering why success suddenly feels so lonely. If you are learning English through stories today, this chapter may surprise you because it begins with hope, passes through doubt, and ends with a discovery that completely changed the way I viewed both language and love. The week after my third conversation with Emily felt different, not better, different. Until then, loneliness had been simple. I missed home. I felt isolated. I wanted connection. The problem was clear. But once Emily entered my weekly routine, something more complicated appeared. Now I had moments of happiness, and happiness creates contrast. A warm Saturday conversation made the rest of the week feel colder. A shared laugh made silence feel louder. A familiar smile made empty rooms feel emptier. Psychologists sometimes describe this as emotional contrast theory. Human beings rarely evaluate experiences in isolation. We compare them. A cold drink feels colder after hot coffee. A quiet room feels quieter after a concert. In the same way, loneliness often becomes more noticeable immediately after meaningful connection. That Monday, winter arrived with full force. The temperature dropped. Wind pushed through the streets like an angry, invisible river. The sun disappeared before I left work. By the time I reached my apartment, Darkness already covered the city. I unlocked the door, entered, closed it behind me. Silence. No television.
No family.
No friends.
No voices.
Just the low hum of the refrigerator. It was amazing how much noise existed inside my thoughts. Back home, evenings had always contained people. A neighbor stopping by. Family talking in another room. Children laughing outside. Someone calling unexpectedly. Here, entire evenings passed without hearing my own name. I heated dinner. Sat alone. Opened my notebook. Tried studying English. The words blurred together. Vocabulary suddenly felt pointless. Why memorize another 100 phrases if I had nobody to use them with? That question lingered longer than I wanted to admit. Many language learners secretly struggle with motivation for the same reason. Language is not mathematics. Its purpose is connection. When connection disappears, motivation often follows. Researchers studying language acquisition consistently find that emotional engagement dramatically improves learning outcomes. People remember vocabulary better when attached to meaningful experiences. They learn faster when communication matters. And suddenly I understood something important. Maybe the laundromat was helping my English not because I was practicing more. Maybe it was helping because I finally cared. Saturday arrived again. But this time, something unexpected happened. Emily wasn't there. I waited. Loaded my clothes. Checked the door every few minutes. Nothing. Another 20 minutes passed. Still nothing. That should not have bothered me. After all, we were not dating. We were not even close friends. Just two people who happened to talk while washing clothes. At least that was the official story. Unfortunately, my emotions had not received that memo. The disappointment surprised me. The laundromat suddenly felt exactly like it had on my first visit.
Bright. Clean.
Crowded. Lonely. I sat quietly watching clothes spin behind circular glass doors. For the first time in weeks, doubt returned. Maybe I was imagining everything. Maybe those conversations meant more to me than to her. Maybe I was becoming attached to an illusion. Human beings are remarkably talented at creating stories from limited information. A smile becomes a signal. A conversation becomes a possibility. A possibility becomes a future. Then reality arrives carrying a baseball bat. To distract myself, I opened my notebook and began writing. Not vocabulary. Not grammar. Just thoughts. Simple English sentences. Slow English. Honest English. I wrote about winter. About missing home. About feeling invisible. About trying to belong. The more I wrote, the calmer I became. There is fascinating research suggesting that expressive writing reduces emotional stress and improves psychological well-being. When thoughts move from the mind onto paper, they often become easier to understand. Half an hour later, while folding clothes, I noticed something. My English looked different. Not perfect. Not advanced. But alive. For the first time, I wasn't writing exercises. I was writing experiences, and experiences are easier to remember than rules. That night snow began falling heavily. Huge white flakes drifted through the streetlights. The city looked beautiful, and somehow even lonelier. I returned home carrying warm clothes and unanswered questions. Then the next morning something happened. My phone buzzed. A message from an unfamiliar number. I stared at it, opened it. The message read, It's Emily from the laundromat. Sorry I missed Saturday. Family emergency. Everything is okay now. I read the sentence once, then again.
Then a third time.
A ridiculous smile appeared on my face. Scientists say anticipation creates dopamine. Apparently text messages do too. The message continued. I hope your English notebook is getting thicker. I laughed, then spent 5 minutes trying to write a response. Deleted it, rewrote it, deleted it again. Some things never change. Eventually I replied, "Glad everything is okay. The notebook is getting thicker. My English is getting slightly less terrible." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then reappeared. Finally her answer arrived. "I don't think your English was terrible." Simple sentence. Huge effect. Because encouragement arrives differently when it comes from someone whose opinion matters. That conversation continued throughout the afternoon. Short messages. Nothing dramatic. Favorite foods. Work stories. Funny misunderstandings. American slang. Winter complaints. Yet every message created another thread connecting 2 separate lives. And that evening I realized something surprising. The hardest part of moving to America was not language, not weather, not paperwork, not cultural differences. It was learning to believe that connection was still possible. Because loneliness is not the absence of people. It is the absence of belonging. Thousands of people surrounded me every day. Yet, as winter deepened, another realization slowly emerged. Maybe I had come to the laundromat looking for better English. Maybe I had found something far more valuable.
Hope.
Not dramatic hope. Not movie-style hope. The quiet kind. The kind that grows slowly. The kind built from repeated conversations. Shared laughter.
Familiar fases.
And text messages sent on snowy mornings. Before going to sleep, I opened my notebook once more. Below the sentence, "Maybe I'm not as alone as I thought," I added another line. Maybe belonging begins before you realize it. Then I closed the notebook, turned off the light, and for the first time in months, I fell asleep wondering what might happen next instead of worrying about what could go wrong. What I did not know was that next Saturday would bring a conversation so unexpected that it would move our relationship beyond laundry, beyond small talk, and beyond anything I imagined when I first walked into that laundromat carrying a basket of dirty clothes and a heart full of loneliness. She always came on Saturdays. There is a strange moment that happens before you admit you like someone. It is the moment when you start organizing your life around coincidences. You tell yourself you are not excited. You are simply arriving at the laundromat a little earlier. You are simply choosing the same day every week. You are simply hoping to practice English conversation. Nothing unusual. Nothing emotional. Nothing dangerous. Then one day you realize you have memorized another person's favorite coffee order, remembered a story they told 3 weeks ago, and check the clock 4 times because they are running 10 minutes late. That is usually when denial begins losing the battle. Looking back now, I can tell you exactly when things started changing between Emily and me. It was not during a romantic dinner. It was not during a dramatic confession. It happened because of a broken dryer, a snowstorm, and a question so simple that it completely rearranged my future. Saturday arrived with heavy snow covering the city. The sidewalks looked like white rivers. Cars moved slowly. The air felt sharp enough to cut paper. Part of me worried Emily might not come. The weather was terrible. The roads were messy. People had good reasons to stay home. Yet somehow I found myself walking faster than usual toward the laundromat. When I opened the door, warm air rushed over me. I looked around. There she was, reading her book, exactly where she always sat. For reasons I could not explain, my entire mood improved instantly. Scientists call this emotional association. When positive experiences repeatedly occur around a specific person, place, or routine, the brain begins connecting them automatically. Eventually, the sight of that person alone can trigger positive emotions before a single word is spoken. Emily looked up and smiled.
Hey.
That word was becoming my favorite part of Saturdays. Hey, I replied, this time without accidentally responding with the name of a day. Progress. As our clothes started washing, we settled into conversation more naturally than ever before. Something had changed during the past few weeks. The pauses felt comfortable now. I no longer spent every second worrying about grammar mistakes. My listening skills improved because I stopped trying to translate every word. Instead, I focused on meaning. This is actually one of the biggest breakthroughs many English learners experience. Beginners often translate mentally. More advanced learners begin understanding ideas directly. It feels less like solving a puzzle and more like participating in life. Emily noticed the difference. You're speaking more confidently. I laughed. My mistakes are becoming more confident too. She laughed. That's how improvement works. That sentence stayed with me because she was right. Most progress looks messy while it is happening. People imagine improvement as a straight line. Real growth looks more like a confused squirrel crossing traffic. Forward, backward, sideways. Then somehow arriving. While talking, I learned something new about Emily. She volunteered every month at a community reading program for children. The idea fascinated me. She explained how reading aloud helped children develop vocabulary, confidence, and communication skills. Then she asked a question. Did anyone read to you when you were a kid? The question transported me years into the past. Suddenly I remembered family stories, evenings at home, the sound of familiar voices, the comfort of belonging. I smiled. Yes, my grandmother. Emily closed her book. Tell me about her. And just like that, something shifted. Until then, we had mostly discussed present-day topics. Weather, work, language, American culture. Now we were talking about memories, personal memories, the kind that reveal who someone really is. For the next 20 minutes, I shared stories I had not told anyone since arriving in America. Stories about family dinners, childhood mistakes, school adventures,
Embarrassing moments.
unexpected lessons. Emily listened carefully, not politely, genuinely. That difference matters. Most people hear words. Very few truly listen. And when someone listens, you feel it. Researchers studying relationships consistently find that feeling understood creates stronger emotional bonds than agreement itself. People do not necessarily need others to share their opinions. They need others to understand their experiences. Then Emily shared stories about her own childhood, her first bicycle, her family road trips, her teenage dream of becoming a writer. The conversation felt surprisingly easy. Almost suspiciously easy. Like two people continuing a discussion that had started years earlier instead of weeks earlier. Then the snowstorm intensified. The wind shook the windows. Visibility outside nearly disappeared. Customers began checking weather reports on their phones. A manager walked through the laundromat making announcements. More snow was coming. A lot more. By the time our clothes finished drying, conditions outside looked terrible. Emily stared through the window. Looks like we're trapped. I laughed. At least we're trapped with clean clothes. She smiled. And for a moment neither of us moved. Neither seemed eager to leave. Then she asked a question. A simple question. A dangerous question. The kind that quietly changes everything. Want to grab coffee while we wait for the storm to calm down? My heart immediately forgot how to behave normally. To be clear, this was not technically a date. At least neither of us called it that. But every human being who has ever lived understands what happens when one person specifically asks another person to continue spending time together. After the original reason for meeting has ended, I tried appearing calm, very calm. Extremely calm. The kind of calm person who definitely did not spend the entire week hoping to see her. Inside, however, fireworks were launching. Sure, I said. One word. Probably the most important word I had spoken all month. 5 minutes later, we crossed the street toward a small coffee shop. Snowflakes swirled through the air. The city looked quieter than usual. Inside the cafe, warm light reflected against wooden tables. The smell of coffee filled the room. We ordered drinks and found seats near the window. Something felt different immediately. The laundromat had always provided a shared activity. Machines, laundry, people moving around. Coffee removed those distractions. Now it was just us. Conversation and possibility. At first we discussed simple things. Favorite movies, books, travel dreams, funny cultural misunderstandings. Then the discussion deepened naturally. We talked about fears, regrets, goals, life decisions. At one point, Emily asked what surprised me most about America. I thought carefully, then answered honestly. How lonely people can feel even when surrounded by other people. She looked out the window, then nodded. That's true. Her voice sounded softer, more thoughtful, almost personal. For the first time, I wondered if she understood loneliness better than she admitted. The snow continued falling outside. People entered and left the cafe. Hours seemed shorter than minutes. Eventually, evening approached. The storm weakened. Reality returned. We gathered our things, walked toward the door, then paused outside. Snow covered the sidewalks. Streetlights reflected against white streets. Everything looked strangely beautiful. Emily smiled. I'm glad my dryer didn't work today. I laughed. Best broken dryer in America. She laughed too. Then we stood there for one brief moment, not speaking, just smiling. And that was when I realized the truth. I was no longer looking forward to Saturdays because of English practice. I was looking forward to Saturdays because of Emily. The realization felt exciting and terrifying because friendship felt safe, hope felt risky. And somewhere between a laundromat, a snowstorm, and a coffee shop, hope had quietly entered the story. What I did not know was that the next chapter would force both of us to confront feelings neither of us had planned for, and a single unexpected conversation would reveal a secret Emily had been carrying all along. Friendship woven between shirts. Have you ever noticed how some relationships do not arrive like fireworks? They arrive like sunrise. So slowly that you hardly notice the darkness disappearing. One day you are simply talking to someone. The next day you realize that person has become part of your routine. Then one morning you wake up and discover they have quietly become part of your life. That was exactly what happened after the coffee shop afternoon. Nothing dramatic changed on the surface. Emily still came to the laundromat on Saturdays. I still carried my basket of clothes through the cold streets. We still talked about ordinary things. Yet beneath those ordinary moments, something extraordinary was beginning to grow. And the strangest part? The thing bringing us closer was not romance. It was vulnerability. It was the willingness to share the parts of ourselves that usually remain hidden behind polite smiles and casual conversations. If you are practicing English listening through stories today, pay attention to this chapter because it reveals a secret most language learners never hear. People connect through imperfect stories, not perfect sentences. The week after our coffee shop conversation felt different from every week before it. For months, America had felt like a place I was trying to enter. Now, it felt like a place I was beginning to inhabit. The difference was subtle, but powerful. Researchers studying belonging often explain that humans do not feel connected to locations. They feel connected to people. A city becomes meaningful because someone important exists inside it. For the first time since arriving in America, I had someone I genuinely looked forward to seeing. And that realization made every ordinary day feel slightly brighter. Saturday arrived. I reached the laundromat. Emily was already there. This time she waved before I even entered. Such a small gesture. Yet it triggered a ridiculous amount of happiness. Human beings are surprisingly easy to program. A smile repeated often enough becomes emotional caffeine. As our clothes began spinning, we settled into conversation effortlessly. The awkwardness that once dominated every interaction had nearly disappeared. Weeks earlier, I had spent entire conversations worrying about grammar. Now, I occasionally forgot I was speaking English at all. This is one of the most fascinating stages of language learning. The language stops feeling like a subject. It starts feeling like a tool, a bridge, a living thing. Emily noticed it too. "You interrupted me twice today," she said. I looked confused. "Is that bad?" "No," she laughed. "It's normal. Native speakers interrupt each other all the time." That observation surprised me. For months, I had treated every conversation like an exam.
Wait.
Listen. Translate. Construct sentence. Speak carefully. Now I was reacting naturally. Not perfectly. Naturally. And natural communication is far more important than perfect communication. While folding clothes, Emily told me something she had never mentioned before. She had been engaged once, years earlier. The relationship ended before the wedding. The confession arrived unexpectedly. One moment we were discussing books. The next moment she was describing heartbreak. I listened carefully. No advice.
No solutions.
Just listening. Sometimes listening is the most generous thing a person can offer. She explained how difficult those years had been. The disappointment, the embarrassment, the feeling of rebuilding life from pieces. Then she laughed softly. I haven't told many people that. I understood why. Certain stories feel fragile. Sharing them requires trust. Trust is expensive. Most people protect it carefully. The fact that Emily shared hers meant something. Maybe more than either of us wanted to acknowledge. Then she asked a question. What's the hardest thing you've never told anyone here? The room suddenly felt quieter. I stared at a pile of freshly folded shirts. Then answered honestly. My biggest fear? She nodded. I took a breath. That I'll spend years here and never truly belong. The words escaped before I could edit them. Silence followed. Not uncomfortable silence. Thoughtful silence. Then Emily spoke. You already belong more than you think. I smiled politely. But she continued. You have friends here.
Friends.
Plural. The word caught my attention. Because until that moment I still thought of myself as someone passing through America, not someone building roots. Yet roots do not appear suddenly. They grow unnoticed beneath the surface. Conversation by conversation. Week by week. Relationship by relationship. That afternoon something remarkable happened. We stayed long after our laundry finished. Again. Nobody suggested leaving. Nobody seemed in a hurry. The laundromat had become our excuse. The friendship had become the reason. As we talked, Emily shared stories about her family, her parents, her younger brother, holiday traditions, funny arguments, embarrassing childhood memories. In return, I told stories about my own family back home. The differences were fascinating. Different foods, different celebrations, different customs. Yet the emotions were identical.
Love. Worry. Pride.
Regret. Hope. Cultural differences often look enormous from a distance. Up close, human beings are remarkably similar. That realization changed how I viewed America. At first I had focused on differences. Different accents. Different habits. Different social rules. Now I was noticing similarities instead. People wanted friendship.
People worried about family.
People feared failure. People searched for happiness.
The details changed.
The human experience did not. Then came a moment neither of us expected. Emily noticed a photograph partially visible inside my wallet. "Who's that?" I looked down. The photo showed my family, taken years earlier. Everyone smiling. Everyone together. I handed it to her. She studied it carefully, then smiled. "You miss them." Not a question. A statement. And she was right. I miss them more than I admitted. Language learners often talk about vocabulary and grammar. Rarely do they discuss emotional exhaustion. Moving between cultures requires constant adaptation. You learn new rules, new expectations, new habits. Meanwhile, part of your heart remains attached to the life you left behind. Emily seemed to understand that without explanation. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said something I never forgot. "You know, belonging doesn't mean replacing where you came from." I looked at her. "It doesn't." She shook her head. "I think belonging means carrying your old home while building a new one." The simplicity of the sentence stunned me, because it solved a conflict I had been carrying for months. I kept treating my past and future like competitors, as if choosing one required abandoning the other. Maybe that was never true. Maybe identity expands. Maybe hearts are bigger than we imagine. As evening approached, customers gradually disappeared. The laundromat became quieter. Outside, winter sunlight faded behind buildings. Emily gathered her things, then hesitated. A tiny pause. Barely noticeable, yet important. "There is something I've been wondering." My heartbeat immediately accelerated. "What?" She smiled. "Why did you keep coming back every Saturday?" An innocent question. A dangerous question. Because both of us already knew the answer. The official answer was laundry. The real answer stood directly in front of me. For a moment, I considered telling the truth. Not all of it. Just enough. Then fear intervened. Fear has terrible timing. "I like the dryers here," I said. Emily stared at me, then burst into laughter. The kind of laughter that makes breathing difficult. "The dryers?" "Yes." "The dryers are your reason?" "Very powerful dryers." She laughed even harder. And somehow that ridiculous answer revealed more than honesty could have. Because her smile changed. Not dramatically. Subtly. Warmly. Like someone who understood the hidden meaning anyway. As we left the laundromat together that evening, snowflakes drifted gently through the air. The city lights glowed against the winter sky. For the first time since arriving in America, I no longer felt like an outsider looking through a window. I felt present. Connected.
Part of something.
What I did not know was that our friendship was approaching a turning point. Because during the next week, a surprising event would force both of us to confront feelings we had carefully hidden behind jokes, conversations, and the world's most famous excuse, the dryers. The first coffee that changed everything. What if the moment you have been waiting for is also the moment you are most afraid of? That is the strange. We want connection, but we fear rejection. We want honesty, but we hide our feelings. We want love, but we build walls so carefully that sometimes even we cannot find the door. Looking back now, I can tell you that one ordinary Saturday changed the direction of my life forever. Not because something dramatic happened. Not because there was a movie-style confession under falling snow. It changed because two people finally stopped pretending they were only there for the laundry. If you are learning English through slow storytelling today, stay close to this chapter because it begins with nervous excitement and ends with a realization neither of us could ignore any longer. The week after our conversation about the powerful dryers felt unusually long. Monday moved slowly.
Tuesday moved slowly.
Wednesday felt like an entire month. By Thursday, I had caught myself smiling at random moments for absolutely no reason. Or At least no reason I wanted to admit. The truth was simple. I missed Emily. Not the idea of Emily. Not the weekly conversations. Her. That realization arrived quietly while I was making coffee before work. One moment I was thinking about grammar exercises. The next moment I was remembering the way she laughed when I blamed the dryers for returning every Saturday. And once that realization appeared, it refused to leave. Psychologists often explain that attraction grows through familiarity, trust, and positive shared experiences. Movies teach us to expect lightning strikes and dramatic chemistry. Real life is usually slower. It develops through repeated interactions. Shared jokes. Consistent presence. Small moments that accumulate until one day they become impossible to ignore. Saturday finally arrived. The weather was surprisingly warm. After months of winter, sunlight filled the streets. People walked without rushing. Children played in nearby parks. The entire city seemed relieved. I entered the laundromat. Emily was not there. My stomach immediately dropped. 5 minutes passed. 10 minutes. 15. Then the door opened. She rushed inside carrying her laundry basket. "Sorry," she said, laughing. "Overslept." It is remarkable how one sentence can instantly improve a day. "No problem," I replied. The relief in my voice was probably more obvious than I intended. As we loaded our clothes into separate machines, our conversation flowed effortlessly. There was no awkwardness anymore. No careful planning.
No rehearse sentences.
The language felt natural. Not because my English had become perfect, because I had stopped fearing mistakes. This is one of the most powerful lessons language learners discover. Confidence does not arrive after fluency. Confidence often arrives before fluency. You become comfortable sounding imperfect, and that comfort accelerates learning. While talking, Emily mentioned a local spring festival taking place downtown the following weekend. Food trucks, live music, community events, families,
Friends.
the kind of gathering that brings an entire city together. "That sounds fun," I said. "It usually is." Then she paused. A tiny pause, small enough that most people would not notice. I noticed, because by now I paid attention to everything. "You should go," she said. "Maybe." Another pause. Then she smiled. "Or we could go together." The sentence landed somewhere between my heart and my lungs. For a moment I forgot how breathing worked. We could go together. Not everyone. Not a group. Not friends from work.
Us.
Together. Human beings are extraordinary creatures. We can survive complex economic systems, operate advanced technology, send spacecraft into orbit. Yet one simple invitation from the right person can completely disable our ability to think. Fortunately, I managed a response. "I'd like that." Emily smiled. A genuine smile. The kind that reaches the eyes. And suddenly the atmosphere changed. Not dramatically, subtly, but unmistakably. Something new had entered the conversation.
Possibility.
The rest of the afternoon passed quickly. Too quickly. As we folded clothes, discussed books, and exchanged stories, I noticed something surprising. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. People reveal their priorities through attention. When someone consistently extends a conversation, asks follow-up questions, remembers details, and looks disappointed when time runs out, those signals matter. At least I hoped they did. Eventually our laundry was finished. The practical reason for meeting had ended. Again. Yet neither of us moved toward the exit. Emily looked toward the street. Then back at me. "Coffee?" My heart immediately recognized this word as both an opportunity and a threat. Coffee had become our unofficial bridge between friendship and something more. "Sure," I said. We walked toward the same cafe where we had escaped the snowstorm weeks earlier. The city looked completely different now.
No snow. No icy sidewalks.
No freezing wind. Sunlight reflected from windows. Trees showed early signs of spring. Everything felt alive. Inside the cafe, we found our usual table near the window. Without discussing it, without planning it, the table had quietly become ours. As conversation continued, we moved beyond surface topics. We talked about dreams, future goals, life plans, the things people reveal when trust becomes stronger than caution. Then Emily asked a question. Do you think you'll stay in America permanently? I looked outside. The answer felt complicated. Months earlier, I would have said I wasn't sure. Now things were different. My future feels more connected here than before. She nodded. I understand. Her voice carried a softness that immediately caught my attention. Then she looked down at her coffee. For the first time all afternoon, she seemed nervous. Emily? Nervous? That was new. What are you thinking about? I asked. She laughed quietly. Honestly? Yes. She took a deep breath, then spoke. I almost stopped coming to the laundromat after the first time we talked. The statement surprised me.
Why?
Because I was having a difficult year. I listened carefully. She explained that after her broken engagement, she had become protective of herself, protective of expectations, protective of hope. For a long time, she avoided emotional risks. Friendships felt safer. Routine felt safer. Predictability felt safer. Then she smiled. Meeting you changed that. For a moment, the entire cafe disappeared.
The sounds.
The conversations. The movement around us. Everything faded. Meeting you changed that. Those 4 words carried more weight than an entire speech, because they revealed something important. The connection I felt was not one-sided. The friendship mattered to her too. Maybe more than friendship. My heart recognized the possibility immediately. My brain attempted to remain professional. It failed. Then she laughed softly. You know what's funny?
What?
You came here to improve your English. I smiled. That's true. And somehow we ended up talking every week. That's also true. She shook her head. Life is weird. It really was. I had entered a laundromat searching for language practice. Instead, I had found understanding, friendship, belonging, and now something that looked suspiciously like the beginning of love. As the afternoon sunlight slowly shifted across the cafe windows, neither of us rushed to fill the silence. Because some silences are empty. Others are comfortable. This one felt meaningful. Eventually, Emily looked at me. Not casually.
Directly.
Then she asked the question that changed everything. Can I tell you something? My pulse immediately accelerated. Of course. She smiled nervously. And in that moment, before she even spoke, I knew the next few minutes would alter the story of our lives forever. Learning love in a new language. What if the hardest English lesson was never about grammar? What if the most difficult words were not vocabulary words at all? What if the real challenge was learning how to say what you feel when another human being suddenly becomes important to you? Most language learners spend years worrying about pronunciation, sentence structure, and irregular verbs. Almost nobody warns you about the terrifying moment when your heart wants to say something meaningful while your brain desperately searches for the correct words. That was exactly where I found myself sitting across from Emily in a small coffee shop on a warm spring afternoon. The question she had just asked hung between us like a suspended bridge. Can I tell you something? For simple words. Yet somehow they carried enough weight to make the entire room feel quieter. If you are practicing English listening through stories today, Stay with me because this chapter reveals how love sometimes begins, not through perfect words, but through imperfect honesty. I nodded. Of course. Emily looked down at her coffee cup, then back at me. For the first time since I had known her, she seemed genuinely nervous. That alone made my pulse accelerate. Confident people rarely appear nervous unless something important is happening. She laughed softly. You know, I spent weeks trying to decide whether I should say this. Immediately, my imagination became completely unhelpful. Human beings are experts at creating worst-case scenarios. Within seconds, my brain had already invented 17 possible disasters. Then she continued. When we first met, I thought you were shy. I smiled. That was accurate. She laughed. Very accurate. The tension eased slightly. Then her expression became more serious. But after a while I realized something. I waited. You weren't just learning English. I felt my heartbeat quicken. You were rebuilding your life. For several seconds, I said nothing. Not because I disagreed. Because she was right.
Perfectly right.
Moving to America had never been only about work, or language, or opportunity. Those were visible challenges. The deeper challenge was identity. Everything familiar had disappeared. The routines, the relationships, the places connected to memories. When people move across cultures, they often imagine they're changing geography. In reality, they are changing parts of themselves. Emily seemed to understand that better than anyone. Then she said something I never forgot. I admire that. The words landed harder than I expected. Because admiration feels different from kindness, different from politeness, different from friendship. Admiration means someone sees your struggle and respects it. For months, I had focused on my mistakes, my accent, my uncertainty, my loneliness. Meanwhile, she had been seeing courage. The realization stunned me. Researchers studying relationships often find that people frequently underestimate how positively others view them. We become experts at noticing our flaws while remaining blind to our strengths. Sometimes another person sees parts of us more clearly than we see ourselves. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence felt warm, comfortable. Then Emily smiled. So, that's what I wanted to tell you. Part of me felt relieved. Part of me felt disappointed. Not because her words weren't meaningful. They were. Deeply meaningful. But if I am being honest, another question had been quietly growing inside me for weeks. And suddenly I realized I could no longer ignore it. Fear and opportunity often arrive wearing the same clothes. I took a slow breath, then laughed nervously. Well, now I feel like I should tell you something too. Her eyebrows lifted. Okay. The words sounded calm. I was not calm. Not even slightly. At that moment, my English vocabulary seemed to vanish again. Not because I lacked words.
Because I cared about them.
The more important a conversation becomes, the harder simple sentences feel. Finally, I spoke. When I first came to America, I thought learning English would solve most of my problems. She listened carefully. But after meeting you, I realized something. What? People are the reason language matters. Her smile appeared immediately. Encouraged, I continued. Before, English was just vocabulary. I paused. Now it feels like connection. The truth surprised me even as I said it. Language had stopped being an academic goal. It had become a doorway. Every meaningful conversation with Emily had proven that. Every laugh. Every story. Every Saturday. She nodded slowly. I like that. The conversation moved forward naturally. Yet something had changed. The emotional distance between us had narrowed. Not dramatically, but undeniably. As we talked, We began discussing cultural differences in relationships. One thing that fascinated me about American culture was the emphasis on direct communication. Many Americans prefer discussing feelings openly rather than expecting others to guess them.
At first I found that intimidating.
Back home, emotions often lived between the lines. In America, they frequently appeared in the actual sentence. Emily explained that healthy relationships often depended on clear communication. Not mind reading. Not assumptions. Communication. Ironically, that lesson applied to language learning too. People improve English fastest when they stop fearing mistakes and start expressing ideas. Relationships improve when people stop fearing vulnerability and start expressing emotions. The principles were surprisingly similar. Then, Emily shared another story from her past. After her broken engagement, she had spent years avoiding uncertainty.
No risks. No disappointment. No emotional investments.
At least that was the plan. The problem was that safety can become a prison. The more carefully we avoid pain, the more thoroughly we avoid possibility. Listening to her, I recognized something familiar. I had done the same thing after moving. Protecting myself from embarrassment. Avoiding conversations. Expecting rejection before connection. Loneliness had not been protecting me. It had been limiting me. The realization connected our stories in a way I had never fully understood before. Different circumstances. Same fear. Different journeys. Same hope. As afternoon slowly turned toward evening, we left the cafe and walked through downtown streets. Spring had arrived almost overnight. Trees displayed fresh green leaves. Families filled outdoor seating areas. Musicians played near intersections. The city felt alive. At one point we stopped near a small public park. Children played nearby. Dogs chased tennis balls. People sat on benches enjoying sunlight. Emily looked around, then smiled. You seem happier now. The observation caught me off guard.
Doi.
Yes. I thought about it. She was right. Months earlier, I had walked through the same city feeling invisible. Now, everything felt different. Not because the city changed, because I had changed. Belonging had started quietly. Conversation by conversation. Week by week. Relationship by relationship. Then Emily asked another question. What do you think helped most? I looked at her. The answer arrived immediately.
You.
The word escaped before I could edit it. For a brief moment we both froze. The air suddenly felt different. The silence returned. But this silence carried electricity. Emily's smile softened. Not playful. Not casual. Something deeper. And in that moment, I realized we had reached a place where neither of us could honestly pretend this was only friendship anymore. The feeling was there. Visible. Unspoken. Waiting. Yet strangely, neither of us rushed. Because some moments become more powerful when allowed to breathe. As the sun slowly lowered across the horizon, we continued walking side by side. Not holding hands. Not making declarations. Just sharing the same direction. Sometimes love does not arrive like thunder. Sometimes it arrives like understanding, like comfort, like the feeling of being seen. And as we said goodbye that evening, I knew something important was approaching. The next conversation would require more courage than any English sentence I had ever practiced. Because learning a language is difficult. Learning to tell someone how much they matter to you is even harder. And very soon, one of us would finally have to say it. When life tested us. Most love stories end the chapter right after two people realize they care about each other. Movies love that moment. Music swells.
Credits roll.
Everybody goes home happy. Real life, however, has a different sense of humor. Real life waits until two people finally lower their defenses, then quietly asks a terrifying question. Can your connection survive pressure? That is where our story changed. Because the truth is this: falling in love did not become the hardest part. Staying connected when life became complicated was far more difficult. If you are learning English through slow storytelling today, this chapter may be the most important one so far. Not because it contains perfect romance, because it contains misunderstanding, stress, fear, growth, and a lesson that transformed both my relationship and my English forever. After our walk through the park, everything felt different. Not official, not defined, but different. Emily and I spent more time together. Coffee became normal. Text messages became daily. Saturday laundromat visits continued even when neither of us actually needed laundry. At some point, we stopped pretending. One evening, while sharing dinner at a small restaurant, Emily smiled and said something that made both of us laugh. You know, most people date before they memorize each other's laundry schedules. And just like that, the truth became impossible to ignore. We were no longer moving toward a relationship. We were already inside one. The following months became some of the happiest months since I arrived in America. We explored neighborhoods, visited local festivals, tried new foods, shared stories, built routines. Life finally felt stable, which, unfortunately, is often when life decides to introduce challenges. The first challenge arrived through money. Nothing dramatic, nothing unusual, just reality. My job hours were reduced unexpectedly. Suddenly my budget became tight, very tight. Rent, bills, transportation, food. Everything required careful planning. Financial stress affects more than bank accounts. Researchers consistently find that money worries increase anxiety, reduce emotional patience, and create conflict even in strong relationships. I discovered that firsthand. At first, I tried hiding the problem, not because I wanted to lie, because I wanted to appear capable, independent, strong. Many people make the same mistake. We confuse vulnerability with weakness. We hide struggles from the very people who would help us carry them. Emily noticed something was wrong almost immediately. You seem distracted. Just tired. That answer worked for approximately 3 seconds. Then she gave me a look that clearly communicated she was not convinced. The problem continued growing. I declined invitations, worked extra shifts whenever possible, studied job listings late into the night. Stress slowly entered every conversation. Not loudly, quietly, like water leaking into a basement. Then one evening it finally surfaced. Emily suggested a weekend trip outside the city. Nothing expensive, just a short getaway. Normally, I would have loved the idea. Instead, I immediately said no. Too quickly. Too sharply. The disappointment on her face appeared instantly. Okay, she said quietly. I should have explained. I should have been honest. Instead, I stayed silent. Silence is often the most expensive communication mistake. The next few days felt different. Text messages became shorter. Conversations became cautious. Neither of us understood what was happening. Psychologists call this attribution error. Emily assumed I was losing interest. I assumed she would not understand my situation. Both assumptions were false, yet both felt true. Saturday arrived. The laundromat felt strangely unfamiliar, not because the place had changed, because the atmosphere between us had changed. For the first time in months, conversation felt difficult. The dryers hummed. Customers came and went. Neither of us seemed able to find the right words. Then Emily finally spoke. Did I do something wrong? The question hit me hard, because suddenly I understood. She had been carrying uncertainty all week, the same way I had been carrying financial stress. Both of us were struggling. Separately. Even though we were supposed to be together. I looked down, then told her everything. The reduced hours. The money worries. The fear. The embarrassment. The pressure. All of it. Once I started talking, I could not stop. For weeks I had been carrying the burden alone. Now the words poured out. When I finished, I waited. Part of me expected disappointment. Maybe judgment. Instead, Emily reached across the table. Not dramatically. Simply. Naturally. Then she said something I will never forget. You know, being in a relationship means facing problems together. Together. Such a simple word. Yet it completely changed my perspective. I had been treating my struggles like private responsibilities. She viewed them as shared realities. Neither approach was completely wrong, but hers was healthier. Relationships are not partnerships between perfect people. They are partnerships between imperfect people who communicate honestly. That conversation solved one problem. Then life introduced another. Because apparently the universe enjoys variety. A few weeks later, we experienced our first major misunderstanding involving language itself. Ironically, after all the progress I had made learning English, communication still managed to create chaos. The situation started innocently. Emily sent a message asking if I was upset about a recent conversation. I responded with a phrase I thought sounded natural. It's fine. 2 words. Harmless. Efficient. Disastrous. What I meant was, I understand. Everything is okay. Don't worry. What Emily heard was, I don't want to discuss it. I am frustrated. Leave it alone. Different meaning. Same words. Welcome to human communication. Language researchers often explain that meaning depends heavily on context, tone, and cultural expectations. Vocabulary alone rarely tells the entire story. Several uncomfortable conversations followed. Confusion increased. Frustration increased. Then eventually we sat down face to face and compared interpretations. The moment we realized what happened, we both started laughing. Not because the situation was funny, because it was absurd. 2 people who cared deeply about each other had spent days worrying because of 2 misunderstood words. Yet that misunderstanding taught us something valuable. Communication is not about saying words. It is about confirming understanding. Since then, we developed a simple habit. When conversations became emotional, we asked clarifying questions. What did you mean? Can you explain that differently? Did I understand correctly? Those questions prevented countless future problems. The experience improved our relationship. Ironically, it improved my English too. Because real fluency is not speaking perfectly. Real fluency is repairing misunderstandings successfully. As summer approached, life gradually stabilized. My work situation improved. Stress decreased. Laughter returned. The connection between us felt stronger than before. Not despite the challenges. Because of them. Strong relationship, communication over silence. Partnership over pride. One evening while walking home, I realized something surprising. Months earlier, I had entered America believing language learning was about vocabulary. Now I understood something deeper. The most important English lessons were never inside textbooks. They were inside conversations, especially difficult conversations. And while Emily and I had survived our first real tests, an even bigger chapter was approaching. Because life was about to offer us something beautiful, terrifying, and completely unexpected. A future neither of us had planned. And one question that would change everything again. The question that changed our future. Have you ever noticed that life rarely asks permission before changing everything? One day you're focused on surviving the week. The next day you are staring at a future you never expected to have. The funny thing is that most life-changing moments do not announce themselves. There is no dramatic music, no flashing sign, no narrator whispering, "Pay attention. Everything is about to change." Instead, the moment arrives disguised as an ordinary conversation, a simple question, a quiet evening, a sentence that seems small at first and enormous later. That is exactly what happened to Emily and me. We had survived loneliness, cultural differences, misunderstandings, financial stress, and the strange adventure of building a relationship between spinning washing machines. We thought we understood where life was going. We were wrong, because one unexpected conversation would force us to imagine a future far bigger than either of us had planned. And if you are practicing slow English listening today, this chapter contains one of the most important lessons in both language learning and relationships. Sometimes growth begins when certainty ends. By late summer, life felt stable again. The kind of stability that makes you relax. The kind that makes you believe problems are finally behind you. My job situation had improved. My English had improved. My confidence had improved. Most importantly, my relationship with Emily felt stronger than ever. Looking back, that period felt almost magical. Not because every day was perfect, because ordinary days felt meaningful. We cooked dinner together, explored local farmers markets, walked through neighborhoods discussing everything and nothing. Even simple errands became enjoyable. Researchers often describe happiness not as a collection of extraordinary experiences, but as the accumulation of positive, ordinary moments. At the time, I did not know that. I simply knew I was happy. One Saturday afternoon, after finishing another completely unnecessary laundromat visit, Emily and I sat outside a small cafe. The weather was perfect. Warm sunlight, blue skies, a gentle breeze. The kind of afternoon that makes people linger longer than intended. We talked about future plans, vacations, career goals, dream destinations. The conversation drifted naturally. Then Emily asked a question. Where do you see yourself 5 years from now? A common question, an innocent question, a dangerous question. Because for the first time, I realized my answer included someone else. Months earlier, my future had been blurry, temporary, uncertain. Now, when I imagined the future, Emily was there automatically. Not because I consciously placed her there, because she belonged there. That realization startled me. I smiled. Well, hopefully still employed. She laughed. Aspiring to greatness. I see. I'm setting realistic goals. She shook her head. No, seriously. I looked at her, then answered honestly. I want a home. The word surprised me. Not a house. A home. There is a difference. A house is a structure. A home is a feeling. Emily seemed to understand immediately. Me too. The conversation paused. Not awkwardly, thoughtfully. Then she added something unexpected. I spent a long time thinking I would never want that again. I knew what she meant. Her broken engagement had left scars. Invisible scars. The kind people carry quietly. Trust takes time to rebuild after disappointment. Hope takes even longer. Yet here she was, talking about the future. Talking about home. Talking about possibility. The significance was impossible to ignore. That evening we walked through a local park as the sun began setting. Families played nearby. Children laughed. Dogs chased frisbees. Everything felt peaceful. Then we noticed a young couple taking engagement photos. Professional photographer. Beautiful clothes. Big smiles. The entire scene looked joyful. Emily watched for a few moments, then smiled. They look happy. They do. We continued walking. But something about that moment lingered. Neither of us mentioned it. Yet both of us were thinking. I could feel it. The topic remained silent. The thoughts remained loud. A week later, life delivered another surprise. Emily invited me to a family barbecue. At first I thought nothing of it. Then I realized what the invitation actually meant. Family, not friends, not coworkers. Family. Meeting someone's family is different. It signals seriousness. It suggests permanence. It implies trust. Suddenly, I felt more nervous than I had during any English conversation in my life. What if they don't like me? Emily laughed. They'll like you. How do you know? Because I like you. That answer should have reassured me. Instead, it made my heart accelerate. The barbecue took place on a sunny Sunday afternoon. I arrived carrying a dessert that I spent entirely too much time selecting. Emily's parents greeted me warmly. Her brother immediately started joking with me. Children ran through the backyard.
People laughed.
Stories filled the air. The atmosphere felt familiar. Comfortable. Almost surprisingly familiar. Then something happened that caught me off guard. Emily's mother asked about my family. A simple question. Yet while answering, I suddenly realized how much my life had changed. Months earlier, I would have described loneliness, uncertainty, isolation. Now I was standing in a backyard surrounded by people who welcomed me. The contrast felt enormous. At one point, Emily's father pulled me aside. Nothing intimidating. Nothing dramatic. Just conversation. He asked about work,
Life. Goals.
Then he smiled. You seem happy. The observation surprised me, because it was true. For so long, happiness had felt temporary, conditional, fragile. Now it felt real, earned,
Built.
That evening, after everyone left, Emily and I walked toward our cars. The sky glowed orange and purple. The air felt calm. Neither of us seemed eager to leave. Then she asked a question. Did you have a good time? Yes. Really? Yes. She smiled. My family likes you. I laughed. That sounds suspiciously official. Maybe it is. The joke lingered, then faded. Then something unexpected happened. Emily became quiet. Very quiet. Not uncomfortable. Just thoughtful. Finally, she looked at me. Can I ask you something? My pulse immediately accelerated. Apparently, that phrase had become dangerous.
Sure.
She took a slow breath. Then asked the question. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Simply. Do you ever think about what comes next for us? The world seemed to pause. Cars passed. Wind moved through nearby trees. Somewhere a dog barked. Yet all my attention focused on that sentence. Because this was no longer a conversation about dating, or coffee, or laundromats. This was a conversation about the future. The real future. The kind that changes lives. For a moment I searched for the perfect answer. Then remembered something important. The best conversations in my life had never required perfect English. They required honesty. So I told the truth. Yes. Emily waited. I smiled. More often than you probably realize. Her expression softened immediately. And in that moment, I knew something important. The future was no longer a distant idea. It had arrived. Standing quietly beside us. Waiting. And very soon, one extraordinary decision would transform our relationship from a beautiful chapter into the beginning of an entirely new story, one involving marriage, family, and a dream neither of us had dared imagine when we first met beside a runaway sock in a laundromat. The promise beyond the laundromat. What if the thing that changed your life forever began with a basket of dirty clothes? It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? If someone had told me during my first lonely week in America that a laundromat would eventually lead me toward marriage, family, and a future filled with more happiness than I thought possible, I would have laughed. Then I would have checked whether that person had accidentally inhaled too much dryer sheet fragrance. Yet life often hides its greatest gifts inside ordinary routines. That is why this chapter matters. Because sometimes the difference between loneliness and belonging is not a grand opportunity. Sometimes it is simply showing up one more time. One more conversation. One more Saturday. One more chance to connect. And in this chapter, Emily and I finally reached the moment where imagining a future together was no longer a possibility. It was becoming a decision. After a conversation outside her parents' barbecue, something shifted. Not dramatically, not overnight, but permanently. The question Emily asked stayed with me. Do you ever think about what comes next for us? The truth was that I thought about it constantly. For months, I had tried to stay focused on the present. The next conversation, the next weekend, the next shared experience. Yet now the future no longer felt distant. It felt close enough to touch, close enough to build, close enough to fear. Because every meaningful commitment contains a hidden risk. The risk of disappointment, the risk of change, the risk of loss. But it also contains possibility. And possibility was finally beginning to outweigh fear. Over the next several weeks, Emily and I started having conversations that felt different from anything before. We discussed practical things. Where we wanted to live, career goals, financial plans, family traditions, values, dreams. Even simple topics suddenly carried greater weight. Researchers who study long-term relationships often note that successful couples spend significant time discussing future expectations. Love may begin with emotion, but lasting partnerships require alignment, communication, and shared vision. At first, those conversations seemed surprisingly serious. Then I realized something. We were not discussing a fantasy. We were discussing a life. And real life deserves careful attention. One evening we sat together at our favorite cafe. The same cafe where we had first escaped the snowstorm months earlier. The same table near the window. The same warm atmosphere. Yet everything felt different. Because now we carried history, inside jokes, shared memories, lessons learned, a growing sense of permanence. Emily smiled while stirring her coffee. Do you realize how strange our story is? I laughed. Only every week.
She shook her head. No, seriously.
I already knew where this was going. The laundromat? The laundromat. We both laughed. The story never became less ridiculous. A relationship built around laundry sounded like the setup for a joke. Yet somehow it had become the foundation of something beautiful. Then Emily asked another question. What's the biggest thing you've learned since moving here? The answer came faster than expected. Connection matters more than achievement. She looked interested. I continued. When I first arrived, I focused on success.
Work, English,
Adaptation,
productivity,
goals. All important things. But none of them solved loneliness.
people did.
Relationships did. Belonging did. Emily smiled. I think that's true. Then she added quietly. You helped me learn something too. What? That it's okay to trust the future again. For a moment neither of us spoke. Because some sentences deserve silence afterward. Not empty silence. Respectful silence. The kind that allows important words to settle. As autumn approached, our routines continued evolving. Weekends blended naturally into shared experiences. Family gatherings. Community events. Road trips. Quiet evenings. Life no longer felt divided into separate worlds. Instead, our worlds were becoming one. And that realization became especially clear during a small but unforgettable moment. One Saturday, we returned to the laundromat. Not because we needed to, because tradition demanded it. The place looked almost exactly the same. The same machines, the same bright lights, the same rows of chairs. Yet everything had changed. The lonely man who once sat silently in the corner was gone. In his place stood someone else. Someone connected. Someone hopeful. Someone loved. While waiting for a dryer cycle to finish, I found myself looking around the room. New customers entered. Some talked. Some sat alone. Some stared at their phones. One young man looked especially familiar. Not because I knew him. Because I recognized the expression. The quiet loneliness. The uncertainty. The feeling of being disconnected from everyone around him. Months earlier, that had been me. The realization hit harder than expected. Growth is difficult to notice while it is happening. Sometimes you only recognize it when you look backward. Emily noticed my expression. "What are you thinking about?" I smiled. "The first day I came here." She followed my gaze around the room. "You've come a long way." Maybe. Or maybe life had simply given me enough reasons to keep showing up. Either way, the result was the same. The loneliness that once defined my experience in America no longer controlled it. That evening we walked through downtown streets covered in colorful autumn leaves. The air felt cool. The city glowed beneath evening lights. Everything looked peaceful. Then Emily stopped walking. Not abruptly, deliberately. I turned toward her. She seemed nervous. That immediately made me nervous. Whenever confident people become nervous, important things usually follow. For a moment, she simply smiled. Then she spoke. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "I used to think the hardest chapter of my life was behind me." I listened. Now I think it was preparing me for something better. Her eyes met mine. Directly. Warmly. Honestly. The meaning was impossible to miss. And suddenly I understood something that had taken me months to learn. Love is not finding someone who removes every challenge. Love is finding someone who makes challenges easier to face. Someone who transforms uncertainty into courage. Someone who helps an unfamiliar place become home. As we continued walking, I felt an unusual calm. Not excitement. Not nervousness. Certainty. The kind that appears rarely in life. The kind that whispers instead of shouting. The kind that tells you that you are exactly where you are supposed to be. What I did not know was that the next chapter would bring the biggest moment of all. A moment involving a ring. A life-changing question. A wedding. Children.
Family.
And the final answer to the question that started this entire journey. Can dirty clothes really clean loneliness? The answer was coming. And it was far more beautiful than either of us ever imagined. Did dirty clothes clean loneliness? What if the answer to loneliness was never hidden inside a self-help book, a motivational speech, or a perfect life plan? What if the answer was much smaller than that? A conversation, a smile, a simple hello spoken at the right moment. When this story began, I thought I was moving to America to build a better future. I thought success would come from hard work, better English, and persistence. Those things mattered, of course. But standing here now, looking back at everything that happened, I realize I misunderstood the journey completely. The most important lesson was not about language. It was not about money. It was not even about adapting to a new culture. The lesson was about connection. Because sometimes the greatest changes in life begin in the most ordinary places. And for me, that place was a laundromat. The weeks after our autumn walks felt strangely peaceful. Not because life became perfect. Because uncertainty was disappearing. For the first time since arriving in America, I stopped wondering whether I belonged. I knew I did. The city felt familiar. The streets carried memories. The routines felt meaningful. And Emily was woven into nearly every part of my life. Then one evening, while sitting together on a park bench overlooking a quiet lake, I experienced something unusual. A sense of certainty. Not hope. Not optimism.
Certainty.
The kind that arrives rarely. The kind that feels calm instead of dramatic. Psychologists often describe decision-making as an emotional process disguised as a logical one. We like to believe major life choices arrive after perfect analysis. In reality, many of the most important decisions emerge when our emotions and values finally align. That evening I looked at Emily and realized I no longer imagined my future without her. The realization felt simple, natural, obvious, and terrifying, because certainty creates responsibility. Once you know what matters, you must decide what to do about it. Over the following month, I found myself planning more than usual, thinking more than usual, smiling randomly for absolutely no reason. Emily noticed. Naturally. "What are you hiding?" she asked one afternoon. "Nothing." That answer convinced her approximately as much as every previous nothing in human history. She narrowed her eyes suspiciously. I changed the subject.
Poorly.
Very poorly. Fortunately, she laughed and allowed me to keep my secret, at least temporarily. Winter returned to the city. Not as harsh as the year before. Maybe because everything felt different. The same snow-covered sidewalks. The same cold wind moved through downtown streets. Yet loneliness was gone. And once loneliness disappears, even winter feels warmer. Researchers studying emotional well-being have found something fascinating. Strong social connections often influence happiness more than income, status, or material success. Human beings are wired for belonging. We do not simply prefer connection. We require it. The truth of that research had become my daily reality. Then came the day. The day I had imagined dozens of times. The day that refused to leave my thoughts. A Saturday. Of course. It had to be a Saturday. Some stories honor their beginnings. This one certainly did. I invited Emily to meet me at the laundromat. She laughed immediately. "We don't even have laundry." "I know." "Then why are we going?" "You'll see." The suspicious look returned, but she agreed. When we arrived, the building looked exactly as it had on the day we first met. Bright lights, rows of machines, people waiting, dryers humming softly, life continuing normally. Yet for me, the place felt almost sacred, because this ordinary room had changed everything. We walked toward the corner where we used to sit, the exact place where countless conversations began, the place where friendship slowly transformed into love. Emily smiled. "I can't believe it started here." "Neither can I." For a moment we simply stood together, remembering, reflecting, appreciating. Then I took a deep breath. The kind people take before changing their lives. My heart immediately began behaving like an amateur drummer. Fast, uncoordinated, completely out of rhythm. Emily noticed. "Are you okay?" "Not really." Now she looked concerned, then curious, then surprised, because I reached into my pocket, and suddenly she understood. The expression on her face is something I will remember forever. Shock, emotion, disbelief, hope, all appearing within seconds. I looked at her, the woman who had transformed an unfamiliar country into a home. The woman who had listened to my broken English, encouraged my growth, shared my struggles, expanded my world. Then I asked the question. Not perfectly, not dramatically, just honestly, because honesty had always been our language. Will you marry me? For one endless second, the universe became silent. Then tears appeared in her eyes. Happy tears. The best kind. And she laughed while crying at the same time. A skill I still do not fully understand. Yes. One word. The most beautiful word I had ever heard. People often describe life-changing moments as explosions. This felt different. It felt peaceful. Like arriving. Like completing a journey and beginning another at the same time. The months that followed passed in a joyful blur. Wedding plans. Family celebrations.
Friends.
Photographs. Laughter.
Hope.
And eventually, a wedding day more beautiful than either of us imagined. Standing beside Emily, surrounded by people we loved, I thought about the first lonely Saturday at the laundromat. The silence. The uncertainty. The isolation. The man I had been then could never have imagined this moment. Yet somehow every step had led here. Years passed. Life continued growing. And then came another chapter. Children. First one. Then another. Tiny voices filled our home. Tiny shoes appeared everywhere. Tiny humans somehow generated infinite laundry. The irony was impossible to ignore. For years the laundromat had connected us. Now our children produced enough laundry to honor that legacy every week. Emily found this endlessly amusing. I agreed. Eventually, parenthood brought new challenges, new joys, new responsibilities. But it also brought something extraordinary. A deeper understanding of family. A deeper appreciation for belonging. A deeper gratitude for ordinary moments. Today, when I look around our home, I see evidence of a life I once believed impossible. Laughter in the kitchen. Family photographs on walls. Children running through hallways. Conversations filling rooms. Love woven into everyday routines. And every once in a while, when carrying a basket of laundry, I remember the question that started everything. Did dirty clothes clean loneliness? Not directly. The machines did not perform miracles. The detergent contained no magic. The dryers offered no secret wisdom. But the laundromat gave me something far more valuable. A reason to show up. A chance to speak. An opportunity to connect. And sometimes that is all life needs. One conversation. One friendship. One brave moment. One ordinary Saturday. If you are learning English today and feeling discouraged, remember this. Progress rarely arrives all at once. Relationships rarely begin dramatically. Belonging rarely appears overnight. Keep showing up.
Keep speaking. Keep trying.
You never know which conversation might change your life. Because sometimes the path to love, family, confidence, friendship, and happiness begins exactly where you least expect it. Sometimes it begins beside a washing machine. So, let me leave you with one final question. What if the conversation you're afraid to start today is the very conversation that could change your life tomorrow? I came to America believing I needed better English. I thought I needed more confidence, more vocabulary, and more success. But life surprised me. The thing I needed most was not perfect English. It was the courage to say a simple hello. A laundromat gave me clean clothes. But a conversation gave me friendship. Friendship became love. Love became family. And family became home. Maybe that's the hidden lesson behind this entire story. You do not have to speak perfect English to connect with people. You do not have to know every grammar rule to change your future. You do not have to wait until you feel ready. Sometimes life rewards the people who simply show up, speak imperfectly, and keep going. So if you are listening to this while learning English, feeling lonely, starting over, moving to a new place, or struggling to believe in yourself, remember this. Every fluent speaker was once a beginner. Every strong relationship started with strangers. Every beautiful story started with one small moment. And maybe, just maybe, your moment is closer than you think. Before you leave, tell me in the comments, what is one small conversation that changed your life? I read your comments, and your story might inspire someone else who needs hope today. If this slow English story helped you practice listening, reading, speaking, pronunciation, vocabulary, or simply made your day a little brighter, please support the channel. Like this video, subscribe for more slow English stories, turn on notifications so you never miss a new lesson, share this video with a friend who is learning English every week. We'll continue exploring real-life stories, American culture, relationships, family, daily life, and powerful life lessons through slow and easy English designed for learners around the world. And remember, a better life doesn't always begin with a big opportunity. Sometimes it begins with a small conversation, a little courage, and one ordinary day that changes everything. Thank you for listening. See you in the next slow English story. Learn English. Build confidence. Change your life.